Hello and welcome. So my name is Hetherington and I did a Qigong form every day for 365 days. And in this video, I'm going to go through and discuss why I did it, which form I did, and I'm going to share with you 6 observations or 6 tips if you want to try something like this yourself, and also talk about some cons or some disadvantages that I came across as well. Okay, so let's get into it. So the backstory is that myself and my wife were actually in Mexico during most of the lockdown, COVID times. And many things were closed up, many things weren't available. We were sort of doing a little bit of yoga, a little bit of qigong, a little bit of exercise, but it was always sporadic. And so I was noticing a bit of back pain coming in from computers and all that sort of stuff. And so I was looking for a qigong form. I don't know, just one day I was looking for a qigong form that was going to go deep into my legs and help my back. And I came across the Jing Qi Gong form. And the Jing translates as loosely as muscle and tendon changing. And it comes from the Shaolin tradition, so it's more in the martial arts sort of strengthening tradition. So after I did, I just did it one or two times, and I was like, wow, this is such a powerful form. And me and my wife at the time were like, let's commit to 100 days. Every day we'll do the Jing, and we'll go from there. 100 days happened. We did it for 100 days. It was so powerful. I was feeling so much better that I just continued, and I ended up doing it nearly every day for 365 days. Sure, there were a few days, I probably missed like 10 days out of the entire year, but on the days that I missed, the next day I would actually do 2 or 3 rounds just to kind of make up for it. So I did at least 365 practice sessions, if you like, throughout the whole time. And so it's such a powerful process, and in this video I'm going to talk about 6 tips that I came across, or 6 observations, and also 1 potential con. So the first tip, if you're interested in qigong or doing something like this, is at the beginning you've got to choose a simple form to practice. The Tai Chi forms that are very common as well, they're actually very complicated, and there's lots of movements. I think 48 movements in one of the most common one. It takes 6 months at least of regular practice to learn 48 moves. It's very complicated. So what I'd suggest is, like the Jing, which is only 12 moves, is to find a form, a basic form, and just stick to that. Not so complicated, doesn't take too long to learn, right? So anything that from 5 movements to something like 12 movements. There's many ones out there. There's the 8 Brocades is a fantastic starter form. The Jing's a little bit more advanced, but still a good starter form. There's the five animal forms as well, like things like that. So if you're interested in doing something like this, choose a simple qigong form or not too many moves, so that it's easy to repeat and you don't have to go through such a strong learning curve at the beginning. The second thing to mention, this is what we notice from doing the qigong every day, is that about every 20 or 30 days is that it feels like the qi gets deeper. Now, what does that mean? So in Chinese medicine college, where I studied acupuncture, they talk about there's different layers of pathology. So when a disease or a pathogen attacks your body, let's say heat attacks your body, the sun, so it hits the exterior first, and your immune system is trying to protect your skin and just off your skin. But then you'll get signs and symptoms of heat, and you can address it. So it's really good to address disease when it's on the exterior or on the surface level. But after a while, if it doesn't get addressed, it starts to go deeper and deeper into the tissues. So this becomes a chronic disease, and it goes deeper and deeper, and eventually it'll hit the organs, which are the deepest tissues. And once it gets to that level, you're kind of in trouble, right? It's a very chronic disease then, and it's harder to get out of your body because it's so embedded. So it's that kind of idea is when you're doing these qigong forms, what we notice is every 20 or 30 days, it felt like there was a deeper experience, a deeper transformation, it sort of gets deeper and deeper into your system. Another way to explain it is that you get more sensitive. There's a deeper layer of awareness that comes into you. When you're doing the practice, like there's just something more powerful. You've got more levels of awareness happening. You can feel this, you can feel this, you can feel this joint, you can feel this joint, you can feel this joint, and you can feel your breathing, you can feel this, you can feel your toe. Your mind goes to a different place. So it's like there's more depth of perception every 20 or 30 days. And what this means is that it never seems to get old. You never really seem to get to a point when you get to the deepest layer of perception. And this is one of the powers of Qigong, I believe, is that you never reach the end of it. It's not like you do a form perfectly and then that's it. It's never like that. It's always like there's a different dimension. There's a deeper way of experiencing something, a deeper way of experiencing your hand, for example. And that creates a very profound meditational experience. And so that's why with Qigong in particular, or these types of practices, is that you have to do them repeatedly, 20 or 30 days, just to get one, just to notch it a little bit deeper. And then another one, and another one, and another one, right? So you just got to keep at it with these types of practices. The third thing we notice is that it really helps if you want to do this type of practice, that there's certain types of the day which are ideal for practicing something like Qigong. They are soon after you wake up, probably within the first hour, hour and a half of waking up is a time slot. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then my favorite one is about 6:30 in the evening, when there's a transition from daytime to nighttime. These times tend to be, I believe, more powerful. You get more of an effect, right? There's a lot in the Chinese medical theory and in a lot of Taoist practices is that when you do something is very important, more so than what you do. So there's certain times of the day that are suited to certain practices, right? And the yogis have this as well. Soon after you wake up, you meditate, you do your practices, you do your yoga and asana, and then you move into other types of practices, right? So it's exactly the same with Qigong form, is that I recommend, and generally speaking, the mornings are yang practices, and the evenings is yin practices. So yang means stronger practices. So in the mornings, more like weights, running, gym, sweating, things like that, even mental strain. And then in the evenings, you pull back a bit, yin yoga, gentle qigong, meditation, softer practices, right? So if you're interested in doing something like this, I recommend trying to create a times slot where you do the practice. Because what I really notice as well is that it sort of takes the pressure off as well. Like if you're sitting on the couch or something, or you haven't done your practices and it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's okay because you're like, all right, 6 o'clock is the time. So you can sort of rest when it's time to rest, and then when it's around 6 o'clock comes, you get up and do your practices. I found that very helpful, and I recommend that as well. The next tip is that music really helps to get you into the groove, if you like. Particularly, Chinese Tai Chi kind of music, right? The sort of ethereal flute Zen type of sound. It definitely helps you get into the mood. There's something about that music and Qigong that just works really well together. Trying to do Qigong with like techno or, folk music or whatever, you can still do it, but it just doesn't seem to quite hit it. It's not as easy to get into the practice as music. So I'll actually leave it in the description below of a playlist that I use quite often. I just click on it, it starts playing this, Chinese Qigong music, and then it's very easy. I start my practice. The next observation, particularly with the Jing, and a lot, actually when I look at a lot of the Qigong forms, is that there's a real emphasis, and what makes it really powerful is the twisting movements. Right? So particularly the spine is really what's one of the major movements is twisting. And twisting looking back, twisting looking down, twisting looking up. These kinds of movements we don't do very often in Western society. We're sitting, driving, lying down, so we're not really twisting very much. And so Qigong, that's why it's so good for the back and so good for the spine and so good for the bones and the joints, is because in many of the movements there's twisting motions, and the ligaments is actually what supports the twisting. There's ligaments attaching from bone to bone usually, particularly on the spine. So when you're twisting, you're really strengthening the tendons. You're lengthening and strengthening the tendons. And it's a very important tissue in the body. In Western anatomy, we tend to focus more on muscles, bones, things like that, a bit more dense. But in the Qigong forms, in the Kung Fu and stuff, it's very tendon orientated, and you really need good, healthy tendons, particularly the way that they view it, to live a long, healthy, and healthy life is that the tendons need to be very healthy. The other observation I want to make is 1 year is kind of baseline. So if you do 1 year of practice of a particular form, you are now basically competent, right? And then it just adds more if you keep going. I'd say give yourself 4 years. Practice a form for 4 years before you're really quite competent. You've got many, many layers understood. Lots of intricacies. You maybe even have your own sort of style to it, or own sort of flavor onto it now. But look at 1 year as becoming baseline competent. I know, in the West, we tend to jump from one thing to the next quite quickly. I learn this form, We get bored easily. But be aware that in Qigong practice in particular, is that it's not about quantity, learning lots of things, because generally if you're learning lots of things, it means you haven't learned the basic things well, right? So the Chinese Qigong approach, Chinese medicine approach, is that you do the basics for a long time without adding too much complication. Because you want to get to a point where you're not thinking about it anymore. That's the key. And you see that a lot in the forms within like karate, taekwondo, kung fu, is that you get to a point where at the beginning when you're learning something, you're using the mind a lot to work out where things are supposed to go, how do I breathe. But after a year of doing it, you don't need the mind so much. Your body, you're able just to really tune into, again, this level of awareness opens up where you're actually just pure sensation. And you're moving based on feeling the qi or feeling the sensation. You're not using the mind to move things anymore. And so that would be considered baseline competency. Right? So just to give you a framework, right? Just to give more of a Western audience a framework, find one form, do that for a year to reach baseline competence. And to add to that as well is that I would even recommend you can add, select 2 forms, 2 practices, choose one as your primary form, say the Jing or the 8 Brocades. That's your primary, non-negotiable. That's the base, and you'll do that no matter what. But then, you get a bit bored or you got extra time, then you can work on your second form on the side. So whether it's Tai Chi or some other form or whatever it may be, you can do that as like a supplement or a complement. But choose a primary form, which is non-negotiable, and then, you can add another form when you've got extra time and stuff like that to work on that on the side. But don't jump from one form and then after a week do another form and go back and then do this and that and that. It's just, you're not really going anywhere. It's like digging a well. Right? You're just digging lots of holes everywhere that don't go anywhere. So when you choose one primary practice, like one Qigong particular form, you want to dig it down till you reach water. before moving too far and trying to dig another hole, right? And the last thing I'll say is kind of a con that I notice is that when doing Qigong every day as a dedicated practice is that I notice in myself I use it as an excuse not to do other practices. So I let my yoga practices go, I let, going for a run a little bit loose, going to the gym a little bit less, because I was like, oh, I've done my Qigong, I've done my exercise, or I've done my practice today, I'm going to tune out, right? So I actually felt like even though I got stronger in the Qigong, I did let a lot of other things sort of fall behind as I was using Qigong practice as an excuse to get out of it. So what that really means is that one Qigong form or one practice is not going to be the silver bullet. You still have to do other things in life. You still have to do other practices. You still have to, do other types of practices to make sure that you're a well-rounded human being, that your training is well developed across the board. Like cardio, you still need to do some weights. The Qigong form, you still need to do some yoga postures. You still need to do meditation, right? You've still got to do all these other practices complementary, and don't use one practice as a way to get out of things, which may tend to happen, what happened for me. So hopefully that's provided some help or some insight about how to practice Qigong. I'll leave it in the description below a little bit more about the Jing if you want to learn more. If you found it helpful, give it a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe to learn more about this type of work. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.